Now, a moment ago, we had the Treasurer Jim Chalmers giving his pre-budget speech. Well, the Shadow Treasurer Angus Taylor is up now in Canberra. Let's listen to what he's got to say.
Easy in Jim Chalmers, but not for hard-working Australian households who are trying to get ahead. The situation here is dire for Australian households. We've seen the biggest collapse in their standard of living in history. As long as we have data, we've never seen anything like what we've seen in the last 2.5 years. We've got Australian families who are struggling to put food on the table. They're struggling to pay their electricity bills. They're struggling to pay for their insurance. They're struggling to get to see a doctor and pay to go to the doctor. This is an economy that is a complete and utter disaster for Australian households. It is not working for hard-working Australians who are trying to get ahead. So we need to see a restoration of our standard of living in this budget. Right now, the plan for the budget, or the last budget indeed, was that we wouldn't get back to the standard of living we had when we were in government, the coalition was in government, until 2030 or beyond. This will be a lost decade for Australian families, a lost decade for Australian families. So the first test for this budget is to restore our standard of living quickly and get back on the pathway to prosperity for Australians that we've been used to in this country. Secondly, we've seen a loss of hope, an absolute loss of hope for Australians who want to buy a home, who are trying to pay off the mortgage, who want to start a business, who want to build a business over time. For hard-working Australians who are wanting to get ahead, they don't see the reward, they don't see the hope. And we need to restore hope for Australians who work hard, who are able then to buy a home, are able to pay off the mortgage, able to start a business, able to build a business, and are able to get ahead if they work hard. Thirdly, we've seen a government that has thrown out the fiscal guardrails, the budget integrity and honesty that has been central to our budgets in this country since Peter Costello was Treasurer. They threw out those fiscal rules. We need to see them re-established. We need to see a budget where the economy grows faster than spending. It's simple. When you do that, then you can bring down deficits, you can bring down debt, and you can get into the black. You can take pressure off inflation. You can boost growth in the economy. You can encourage the private sector to invest, and we're seeing the exact opposite under Labor. This government has been an absolute disaster for Australian families. Not only have they seen sharply rising prices, they're paying way more tax. And we see today reports that for an average Australian in New South Wales, by 28-29, they'll be paying an extra $10,000 in personal income tax versus when Labor came to power. This is a government that is grabbing from household budgets to support its own spending habits. And we, unfortunately, expect we will see more of that in a budget tonight that won't be for the next 5 years and beyond. It'll be for the next 5 weeks. Happy to take questions.
Angus, will you then cut taxes if you become Treasurer?
Well, we've been very clear. We'll re-establish the tax to GDP cap that was in place that Jim Chalmers threw away. He threw it away. He gave up the ghost. I mean, this is a government that believes in government spending, big government, and that's why we've opposed over $100 billion of wasteful spending at a time like this. I mean, we know if you want to beat inflation, if you want to boost growth, if you want to back small business, then you need to cut waste, you need to slash red tape, and we know that because that's what's worked in the past. That's always been the formula for success when you've had an economic downturn like this. We've never seen a magnitude like this, but we've seen economic downturns in the past, and we know the answer, and that's what the answer is.
The budget is in much better shape than it would have been under the coalition. What would you do if the coalition was to form government to get the budget back into a surplus? How soon could that happen?
Can I say, all we hear from this Treasurer is nonsense. All we hear from this Treasurer is excuses. And this bloke makes it up as he goes because he doesn't understand economics. He doesn't understand economics. He's barely worked outside of the public sector, outside of politics. And he hasn't got a clue. The truth is that we'll see tonight that this government has had a tax grab, made a tax grab on the private sector in this country, households and and businesses of around $400 billion. And he's squandered that. He's absolutely squandered that. Now, we know that at a time like this, when Australian households are having to tighten their belts, having to work hard to make ends meet, to pay those bills that I talked about earlier, we've got to make it easier for Australian households. And one of the ways to do that is to make sure there's not government waste, there's not spending that we don't need to make. And that's why we've opposed over $100 billion of spending since Labor came to power. And we've said that the public service has got too big. It's got too big. I mean, small businesses are struggling to put another person on. You've got mum and dad small businesses out around this country. I see them wherever I go, where they can't pay the overtime. They can't pay to employ people at weekends, so they're having to do the work themselves or bring the kids in to do the work as part of the family. And this government said, no, let's just keep growing the public service. This is a disaster for Australians. They don't understand economics. They don't understand the economy. They don't understand that the private sector drives prosperity, enables us to pay for those essential services we all need, enables us to pay for the defence of this country that we need. It's that strong private sector that's the key, and that's where this government has failed.
Tom Ravlick, I write for the Mandarin, International Tax Review and Professional Planner.
Yep.
The Menzies Research Centre recently issued a report called Stopping the Bloat. In there are some measures related to benchmarking the public service, see whether things can be cut back and trimmed back. How much of that report is the Coalition going to adopt as part of policy?
Well, what we've said is the public service has got too big. We'll get it back to the levels it was at when we were last in government. I learned in my private sector career, I had one unlike this hopeless treasurer, in the real world.
All right, we'll leave that there because we've got a lot to get to in the remaining 20 minutes of this program, but that's the Shadow Treasurer Angus Taylor there.